This is not a video that I wanted to make particularly, and one that I've actually held off on since Renegades launched. Going into the DLC, I had some pretty high hopes for it, but tried to be cautiously optimistic, knowing what state the game was in and that there was really no way to judge what kind of package Renegades would come to be. Unfortunately, I was immediately disappointed by Renegades, and maybe in an incorrect move on my part, I decided to try to ignore these disappointments and not discuss my thoughts on it. I mostly just didn't want to be a part of any amount of negative discourse, and I also look at it like at the end of the day, I'm just some dude and my subjective take on the DLC doesn't quite matter, and since I saw a lot of positive buzz, I decided to nix the review. However, after forcing myself to look past Renegade's faults for the last 2 months, I've completely burnt myself out on Destiny, frustrated by the endless cycle of live services and how threadbare this expansion has been. I no longer have any drive to play the game, and since it's affecting me, it's affecting the channel, and it will continue to affect the channel, I feel I owe it to those that have supported me thus far to make this video and be honest with you. In my opinion, Renegades is not an expansion. It's nothing more than the exact same seasonal formula everyone spent years bagging on, just packaged into an excruciatingly boring few hours and sold at a higher price tag. Perhaps I'm in the wrong for this part of the perspective, but what's bothered me so much about this is seeing a lot of discourse online that's used Edge of Fate in comparison as some sort of scapegoat to prop up Renegades. I've seen countless posts and videos and what have you of people saying that this campaign is great, or it's a return to form, or it's one of the best things we've had in a long time, and it's so much better than Kepler, and that somehow Renegades proves what went wrong with Destiny in the Edge of Fate. I could not disagree more with this notion, as to me, it's like saying Episode Heresy's campaign was better than the Final Shape, or that it's in any way even comparable. When you break down what's on offer in Renegades and what was on offer in the Edge of Fate, and you compare that to previous releases, the scope and quality of these offerings are objectively not even in the same ballpark. To properly articulate the way I feel, I need to give you a baseline with the Edge of Fate. Edge of Fate came with it a fully separate, standalone campaign experience with over a dozen curated missions on a destination dedicated to that campaign. It was filled with several unique areas, interesting enough secrets and puzzles to incite exploration, great encounters, and an excellent story tied to the destination and how you engaged with it, with the additional difficulties introduced in Fabled and Mythic, as well as their ties to Kepler's tiered rewards and progression. There was a really worthwhile reason to replay the campaign, and cranking the difficulties was a fun challenge. While people disliked the portal system, I always enjoyed it, finding it a fun, easy, extra way to engage with the game at my own pace and at my own difficulty settings while netting me some seasonal gear. I liked working up the tiers as I experimented with weapons and rolls, and earning armor sets enhanced the loot chase just as it enhanced build crafting. Finally, Desert Perpetual was an excellent raid with some of the best encounters we've ever had, as well as some great loot, making it well worth the time. These facets of the Edge of Fate are ones that you can draw direct comparisons to when you look at previous expansions and campaigns, even if you may feel that they're not up to snuff. Specifically, destinations and curated missions on those destinations always defined campaign experiences like the Witch Queen, Final Shape, Beyond Light, and even Lightfall. While the quality of the storytelling or narrative might vary in those offerings, missions, encounters, environments, and exploration were all staples of the experiences. While you may not like Kepler's campaign experience, its design and gameplay is objectively far more similar to that of the Pale Heart than it is to missions from a season or an episode. Demonstrably, the exact opposite is true for Renegades, as its offerings are directly comparable to something like Episode Revenant, or specifically Episode Heresy, and it's almost nothing like what's been on offer in previous expansion level campaigns. As with Episode Heresy, Renegades almost entirely revolves around a single seasonal activity, with the campaign missions taking place inside that activity with the rare expanded area or small idea. These locations are reused repetitively as something to just keep you busy while characters dump dialogue and story beats on you as you play. Excluding the exotic mission, which I do think is a highlight of Renegades, there are only 5 missions on offer, as you can see in the replay tab. Of these 5 missions, 3 of them take place on frontiers, with several of the objectives just being ones you do in the activity already. already. There is the one where you get the ATST, the one with the suspending pikes, and the third one on Venus, but what you actually do in these missions has no connection to these areas, and they're really just set there out of convenience. You also just do 3 normal runs of Frontier throughout the campaign, and to me, these felt the exact same as the other replayable missions do, as it's just you running around doing mostly random stuff while characters talk at you. These missions are also really boring, and I think designed pretty poorly, with the Europa mission being the worst of them all. On it, you land, you have to run all the way across the map planting flags, a Thresher spawns, you have to chase all the way back across the map, you then head to the other side of the map again, fighting a boss in the middle, where you have to carry a cannon around so you can kill the ATSTs, which are scattered all around the map, and then you do the whole pike thing in the middle. Now, this might feel a bit better if you're in a fire team, but as a solo player, this mission was an absolute nightmare to deal with. The ATST mission on Mars was similar, where there were enough enemies that would spawn on the objectives that they would always destroy my ATST, and I'd have to grab a fresh one at least 2 or 3 times in each area. It took way longer than it should have, and I just don't find it fun at all to just sit in an ATST holding my mouse button and eviscerating everything around me. The aesthetics of the first mission and the last mission are cool, and I think they're pretty good missions, but looking at a campaign that takes several hours to clear, they make up maybe a half hour to 45 minutes total, and the rest of it feels like total filler. In example, steps 11 to 24 of the campaign is doing nothing but running around the outpost, talking to vendors, or going to orbit and watching cutscenes. I genuinely can't handle playing the campaign again to try to get footage for this, so I watched Dato's stream to time how long this section took, and it's nearly 30 minutes straight. There are countless stopping points like this throughout the campaign where you do this awful filler, which just pads out an already tedious campaign, doing things like hanging up advertisements for the Vex around the cantina. One of the best parts of Destiny's campaigns was always their connection to their respective destinations, and as Bungie continued to evolve the formula of campaigns, that connection grew deeper. But for me, this is a total step back. What I appreciated the most about Kepler specifically is you can play the entire campaign without ever needing to go to orbit a single time. Everything in the campaign is set on Kepler, and every time you complete any mission, you're loaded right back into your instance so you can immediately continue playing. While there are a few moments where you need to return to the Caldera to talk to Lodi or watch a cutscene, you can just run there and look for secrets along the way or do a side quest, and you never have to wait through a loading screen to go to orbit or go to the tower, so you can just run over to Zavala and then leave. Final Shape is another great example of this, as a majority of the campaign, with the exception of the Liminality Strike, can be done in one go, and the linearity of the campaign's design really shines through as a result. It feels great to progress across the incredible, expansive environment of the Pale Heart as you gather your team, experience the story, and work towards taking down the Witness. Every single mission or objective you do throughout Renegades stops you in your tracks, from loading to orbit or to the cantina or into an activity, or just sitting in unskippable dialogue or cutscenes. On Kepler, a lot of the story does come from Lodi and Ikora talking to you as you do missions or the occasional cutscene, but you also get to learn about things like the Ionians or the Archon as you explore their respective areas. The environments tell some amount of the story as well, and because what you're actually physically doing in-game or exploring has a direct connection to what Lodi or Ikora is talking about, things make sense and feel consequential. The connection to the environments is just not there in Renegades, as it's rarely there in other seasonal campaigns, which is unfortunately par for the course when environments and set pieces are constantly reused and recycled to make the missions. As a result, the story needs to either make excuses as to why there's no enemies in the area this time, or why there's a different boss, or they have to try to justify your actions, or they just ignore it wholesale, and the missions feel even less tied to the story as a result. While I do think the narrative they tried to tell in Renegades was fine, for me it ended up feeling rather inconsequential, as I was spending the vast majority of my time just doing busy work while I tried to keep track of the ceaseless conversations characters were having with each other to try to get the narrative across. So to not just spend 20 minutes explaining why I can't stand this campaign, I'll just sum it up by saying I think it's boring, tedious, completely uninspired, and is in no way of a similar quality to every other previous expansion campaign, including Kepler. That is an extremely important part of my criticism, as at this point you might be thinking, well, it's meant to be a smaller expansion. It's not fair to compare it to the Final Shape, as Bungie mentioned that that would be the plan for the Year of Prophecy, but Edge of Fate and Renegades themselves are marketed as equal or comparable. In my opinion, Edge of Fate does stand up objectively as being of a similar quality to previous expansion level campaigns, while Renegades does not, and yet people refuse to extend that grace to the Edge of Fate that they have to Renegades. To be honest with you, I could probably forgive the fact that I don't like the campaign if I liked the rest of what the season offered and I could just look at it as a season, but I don't, and I think it's similarly phoned in. For my money, Frontiers is one of the most repetitive, boring, and uninteresting activities I've played in a long time, and beyond the campaign and the dungeon, it's the only thing the season has to offer. While yes, it can be set on different planets and has some very slight variety in the objectives, you really do the exact same thing over and over every time you play, and I don't think what you're doing is fun enough to justify the reps as it is with something like Onslaught, an example. All you do is you load in, you have to run across this giant, mostly empty map to wherever the objective marker is, you either clear some waves, stand on a thing, or move a thing, and then you run across the map again to the next marker. These maps are completely barren, with nothing worthwhile between these arenas you do the objectives in, aside from some pots you can break and some extremely lackluster secrets for chests. Since you're also incentivized to open these chests to get extra rewards, I or one of my teammates would always spend the entire time running around doing nothing but looting chests and shooting panels, and by the time I actually got to the objective to try to help my team, they'd already be done and I just had to run to the next thing. I also really dislike the adjusted health pools in the activity, although I don't like them in anything, including Brawn in the portal and how things were in the Nether, as I just think it alters too much about the flow of combat and build crafting. It really narrows what you can play, as certain builds or options are just not viable or strong enough to handle the way the activity functions, and it just further limits the variety. However, in Frontiers specifically, this decision is made entirely to incentivize the use of either the Praxic Blade, which is just way too strong, or Frontier abilities, which are similarly strong and, in my opinion, unfun. You just get so many charges and they're so on demand, it feels awful to try to use anything else other than Prismatic ability spam and Praxic Blade, and clearly the activity is tuned with that in mind. The ATST specifically is so strong that if I'm in a match-made Frontiers and just one of my teammates is in one, I literally don't have to play. I can just sit there and watch them solo everything completely uncontested, and they blow every enemy to smithereens before I can even attempt to help them. I understand that this fulfills a power fantasy or whatever, which is something people love to talk about, but to me, it's just unfun, poorly designed, and it again leans into the repetitive nature of the activity. I honestly haven't really played Frontiers since about the second week of the DLC, because I can't stand how boring I find it, and I've instead chosen to spend most of my time in the portal. Because the power levels also weren't reset, which honestly I'm okay with, I got all the rolls that I was looking for in that first week, and the only thing left was grinding it out for Praxic Crystals, which I will not be doing. While yes, the different blade colors are cool, and I'm glad they gave us ways to actually earn them in-game, I personally can't handle running Frontiers for days on end just so I can hope I can make my lightsaber purple. Thankfully, I managed to get the red blade pretty quickly because I think invasions are absolutely atrocious to both deal with and to play, so I was happy to be in and out of that whole thing in about a day. The broader progression system of the season is also pretty lackluster, as the syndicates are clearly meant to offer something to do, but they're nothing more than a chest you dump resources into to earn drops. In comparison to something like the Tome and the Shaping Slab from Heresy or the Tonic system from Revenant, the syndicates are a total nothing burger, and some sort of wider seasonal progression could have gone a long way to making the season feel more tied together and more worthwhile to play. So to sum up this section as well, I just want to express that this is a subjective opinion, and if you really like this activity and you really like Frontier abilities or invasions, I think that's great. I personally really do not. I think it's extremely repetitive, the tuning of the activity reduces variety way too far, and it's overall just unfun to me, as it's really just the Nether 2.0 with worse environments, exploration, and engagements. I think the loot pool this season is broadly fine, but for me, that's not what incentivizes me, as it's more an ends to a means for me to build craft and actually play. The portal offerings, however, are substantially worse than what was on offer last season, as there's nothing standout that I would want to chase. Considering there were weapons like mid-retrograde and armor sets like TechSec, what's on offer now just cannot hold a candle, but again, it's not a huge deal to me. me. I do like the Frontier gear, as the heat weapons are awesome and the armor sets are great, but you just get inundated with so many rolls everywhere you look, with so many currencies and chests and weekly rewards. I got tired of sifting through hundreds of drops almost immediately. Since I don't like playing Frontiers, I've spent the entire season in the Portal, just as I mostly did during Edge of Fate, which I have enjoyed far more than Frontiers, but it's grown stale for me, as it's been the main thing I've chewed on for the last 6 months or so. Since I play solo, there's a more limited selection of activities. They didn't really add too many new ones this season, and there's only so many modifiers I can deal with, so I don't exactly plan on spending the next 4 months in the Portal as well. The last thing I should cover is Equilibrium, which I think overall is a pretty good dungeon, but I personally have no interest in farming it, so it's also sort of run its course for me. Again, I play solo, and while I usually avoid talking about qualifications or whatever because everyone does it, I have extensive experience in dungeons. They're one of my favorite solo parts of the game, and I've soloed every dungeon but Sundered because I can't be bothered, and I even learned Vesper's Host solo and completed a solo flawless in the first 2 weeks. With that all in mind, I think Equilibrium is an excellent first time through, as its aesthetic design is fantastic and its encounters are relatively easy to play and understand, but I haven't really enjoyed it much replaying it afterwards. For me, since once again I have to do it solo, I just find it to be pretty monotonous. I think it takes a really long time, and I'm just not at a point where I'm down to farm dungeon encounters. I'd say in terms of fun factor, it's probably the bottom 5 or so of dungeons that I would want to run as a solo player, and just for kicks, here's a list. Again, this part is totally subjective, and I know a lot of people really like Equilibrium, but I just wanted to point out that for me, it's a good dungeon, but it doesn't really sway my opinion on the season one way or the other. So here's the thing. Final Shape was about $70 Canadian when it launched, and about $120 with the annual pass, making each season roughly $20, rounding up just to make the numbers easy. In comparison, the Year of Prophecy launched at $90 Canadian, but both Edge of Fate and Renegades are sold separately for $50. That means that Kepler, in my opinion, gives you a far closer experience to the Final Shape campaign for $20 less, while Renegades gives you an experience almost identical to Episode Heresy for about $30 more. Now, I know that cost is not everything, and that value in a product is also subjective, but I just think it illustrates the comparison between Edge of Fate and Renegades in an important way as being marketed as equal or comparable. Even in the lead up to the Year of Prophecy, Bungie talked about how the year would be split into 2 similar medium-sized expansions, advertising them very clearly here as equals. In the end, though, I think objectively, Edge of Fate is the far superior expansion in every category, from its campaign to its design to its story or even its gear. Every single objective quality of Edge of Fate to me completely outperforms everything on offer in Renegades, and yet the community decided that Edge of Fate was some sort of slap to the face and Renegades is some sort of righting of the ship. While I'm not trying to communicate that I think player perception is the problem or yada yada, what this will do is signal to Bungie what direction they plan to take the game into. They will no longer attempt to take any risks or try to evolve the formula of Destiny as they attempted in the Edge of Fate, and will instead reapply the same safe, uninteresting formula that drove seasons for years and has defined Renegades, because clearly they'll think it's what players want. Why would they dedicate months or years on end to attempting to evolve Destiny when they can just make one mediocre activity, throw together some flashy cutscenes, staple some dialogue on top, and call it a day? In the end, I think this is mostly an issue with the nature of live service games, which have proven to be extremely unhealthy for the landscape of gaming and game development specifically. The industry has been reeling for years from the effects of this golden goose chase companies have been on to make the next big live service hit. Both companies and players want everything to be the next Fortnite or the next Apex or the next Destiny, and it's become the norm for players to expect their favorite games to be infinite, and for companies to desperately vie for the opportunity to service that want. So with that in mind, Destiny will not die, because Sony would never let it. Who knows what they're going to sell us in the future or how they're going to approach the future of the franchise, but I can guarantee you that one thing is for sure, and it's that they're going to be doing it with profit in mind. I think Renegades will set the stage for their approach, as they try to satisfy an audience that is mostly loud, volatile, and unpredictable. I'm guessing the results won't be attempts at evolution, like Edge of Fate or Final Shape, and will be more safe, cheap, easy options to create engagement instead of innovation. Interest in Destiny is at an all-time low, myself included, and I think that's alright. Honestly, it happens. All things wax and wane or come to an end, and it doesn't change that I think Destiny 2 is an incredible game, but it does not need to be infinite. I've enjoyed it for thousands of hours, and I'll always look back on it fondly, but at this current point in time, the endless cycle of live services has totally broken me, and I need to step away. I'm extremely honored to have had the opportunity to make the videos I have over the last few months, and Whacker Wild stands to me as one of my greatest personal achievements and sort of like my love letter to Destiny. I'm proud of the positivity I attempted to cultivate in those videos and the fun I was able to share with all of you along the way. When I started making the videos, I of course never expected anyone to watch, and I didn't really know how long the series would last, but I will say that this is not a definitive end. I will happily return to Destiny and to Whacker Wild in the future when the time feels right for me and when I'm motivated to actually make the series. But for now, forcing myself to crank the videos out just to satisfy an audience is exactly what these live service experiences are trying to do, and it's exactly what they want us to do to stay stuck. As I was editing this video, the news broke that Shadow and Order would be delayed until June 9th, but I did not want to alter my original script in any way or have it affect any part of my review, so I decided to leave it out completely. I also just don't really have anything to say on the topic, as I personally wasn't really looking forward to the update anyways, and it also wasn't much of a secret that the delay would be happening. Perhaps that will be when I return to the game, but it might be sooner or later. Again, I'll be happy to return when the time feels right. For now, I don't plan on just giving up on the channel because I don't want to cover Destiny right now, as I've learned so much along the way about making these videos and about sharing my love for gaming, so I plan on continuing to grow the channel and trying to branch out. If you like my style, if you like what I do, please consider giving the next few videos a try, as I'd really appreciate the support. But if you're just here for the Destiny, I totally understand, and I apologize that I can't fill that role for you any longer. I've been completely obsessed with Deadlock lately, so I'll definitely be covering that, and I also plan to do stuff on Marathon when it launches in a few weeks, as I'm really excited for it. Otherwise, I might try some game reviews or just make some videos on some of the games that I've loved in the past, and try to continue sharing as much fun and positivity as I can. I'd like to say thank you to anyone who's watched my videos and supported my channel this far. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity you've afforded me, and I hope you can continue to enjoy the content that I make on the channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.